We have a lot of other really good players in our program, as does Oklahoma. But I think it's just so unique that hopefully it'll just make for a great build-up to the game, and the excitement and enthusiasm about it will just be just sky high.
And how about this one? The Las Vegas Marlins, it doesn't have a very good ring to it, does it? But Florida officials have looked into the possibility, meeting with Sin City representatives yesterday about a possible move. A Marlins spokesman says negotiations for a new stadium in Miami have taken longer than expected, prompting the discussions. Now the Heat, meanwhile, coming home happy. Miami finishing their road trip sporting a 3-1 record. Last night outlasting the Bucks 101-96. Udonis Haslem picking up the slack for Shaq, who dealt with foul trouble most of the game. The U-Dominator with an impressive line. Listen to this: 20 points, 13 boards, 6 assists, and 1 block shot.
You know, we take a couple steps back every now and then, but, you know, in the long run, I think it's going to help us that guys starting to understand the role, and we're stepping up. They're going to key on our guys, Dwayne, Shaq, Eddie. You know, oftentimes they forget about me, and I just keep working no matter what. I keep working. If I get open shots, I knock them down, rebound, and do the little things.
And finally, Broward's hopes for a state football title heading for Gainesville today. St. Thomas boarding the bus this morning, making final preparations for tomorrow night's 5A championship with Lakeland. And good luck to those guys. Should be a good game, a 5A championship. That'll do it for sports. Back to you guys.
Yes,
Bring it back to Broward.
Well.
Thanks, Joe.
Well, that's our report for now. Thank you so much for watching.
Stay tuned. NBC Nightly News is next with Brian Williams. Then join us at 10 on WB39. And Jackie and I are right back here at 11 o'clock.
Good night.
Thank you for making NBC6 your choice for news. Join Tony Segredo and Jackie Nesprold for NBC6 News at 11. And for news 24 hours a day, log on to NBC6.net or listen to us on 87.7 FM.
Tom Cameron Quaid. Scott Huntley. David Brinson, John Chancellor.
Battle ready? Why don't American soldiers have the best armor possible to keep them safe? Why can't the nation that mobilized for World War II do it again? Amazing Grace, last respects for an American hero who survived 9/11 only to lose his life while serving his country. Secure future? The president pledges to protect Social Security and says a payroll tax increase is off the table. So where will the money come from? Game over. Soccer legend Mia Hamm plays her final game, but not before changing the world for a generation of young athletes.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Among soldiers serving in Iraq, it was always the topic that was whispered about, talked about, even the subject of an occasional complaint: the shortage of armored vehicles in a very dangerous land of drive-by attacks and roadside bombs. But it was not the topic of national conversation in this country until an Army Reserve specialist from Tennessee stood up and fired the question at the Secretary of Defense during a visit to Kuwait. Now the U.S. president has weighed in, and everyone is wondering, why aren't the best trained soldiers in the world also the best protected? We begin here tonight with NBC News Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski.
It was the question heard round the world from Army National Guard Specialist Thomas Wilson on his way into Iraq.
Now, why do we soldiers have to dig through local landfills for pieces of scrap metal and compromised ballistic glass to up-armor our vehicles?
At one point in his response, Secretary Rumsfeld sounded almost dismissive.
As you know, you go to war with the Army you have.
But today at the White House, President Bush said if he were headed into combat, he'd ask the same question.
The concerns expressed are being addressed, and that is we expect our troops to have the best possible equipment.
But as of today, only about 1/3 of the military's 20,000 MVs in Iraq are fully armored. When American troops first took Baghdad, only U.S. military police had the fully armored Humvees. But when insurgents turned up their attacks with roadside bombs, Americans started taking heavy casualties. And Congress came up with additional funds to turn up production of the heavily armored vehicles. But the Pentagon gave the contract to only one factory in Ohio, which is now working near full capacity. Officials there say today they can turn up production another 20%, but the Pentagon has yet to approve it.
Frankly, this whole issue of lack of armor protection is another great illustration of the poor planning that went into this operation.
And what about the claim that troops are digging through landfills to find their own armor? Military officials don't believe it, but do say they will recycle any usable parts off broken down Humvees to put on newer vehicles.
We don't normally throw things that we can use back into a trash bin or a landfill type thing.
That means armor is hastily being tacked onto Humvees in Iraq and Kuwait, creating several different levels of protection. Fully armored Humvees include armored plating on the sides, top, and bottom, and bulletproof windows. Level 2 has armored sides and hardened glass, but no armor on the roof or floor. Level 3 only has armored sides, no bulletproof windows. That leaves 2/3 of the Humvees in Iraq still vulnerable to a roadside bomb blast from beneath the vehicle. As for the question from Specialist Wilson, a newspaper reporter now claims he helped Wilson put it together. Whoever came up with the question, it's put the debate over the safety of American troops front and center. Jim Miklaszewski, NBC News, the Pentagon.
To a lot of Americans, just the thought of U.S. soldiers making do with less than adequate battlefield protection runs counter to that can-do American spirit that supplied the Allied effort back in World War II. Tonight, NBC's Tom Costello looks at how times have changed at home and on the field of battle.
60 years ago, America was engaged in a war of survival, facing enemies in Europe and Asia. With 16 million Americans under arms, the country came together, sacrificing for sons, brothers, and fathers fighting half a world away. Store shelves were empty as families rationed butter, meat, even gasoline, while the nation's industrial complex churned out war machinery at a rate never seen before.
Franklin Roosevelt declared America the arsenal of democracy, meaning that if you're going to go to war in the Pacific and Europe, that you've got to keep your troops armed properly.
But the war in Iraq is not World War II. Instead of an army of draftees, today it's an army of volunteers and reservists doing the fighting on the ground and still showing the ingenuity so characteristic of the American GI, searching through desert junkyards for scraps of metal to bolt onto their Humvees for added protection. And while it's business as usual for many back home, the families of soldiers and Marines have also been pressed into action, sending flak jackets, radios, and GPS units to the front lines.
We simply did not anticipate having enough vehicles on the scene, and we certainly didn't anticipate having enough to leave them there for the time they've been.
The Pentagon is rushing more armored-plated Humvees to Iraq. Amid reports it is still short some 2,000. But in Florida, a company that makes armored-plated kits says so far, the Pentagon has not asked for any help.
We just basically want to let them know that we're here to help, and we have a facility 100% dedicated to this effort.
While the military says it's responding as quickly as it can to safeguard the lives of Americans fighting an unconventional war, some families and soldiers now wonder whether the nation's commitment to Iraq is as great as it was to a cause 60 years ago. Tom Costello, NBC News, Cocoa Beach, Florida.
You may remember the strange case of Marine Corporal Wasef Ali Hassoun, who disappeared mysteriously from Camp Fallujah in Iraq last June. He turned up on a supposed hostage tape and then just as mysteriously surfaced in Lebanon, a free man. Well, now the U.S. military is bringing charges against him. NBC's Pete Williams is in our Washington bureau tonight. Pete, what do we know about this?
Well, Brian, the charges are serious. They include desertion to avoid hazardous duty and could bring as much as 25 years in military prison if Corporal Hassoun is convicted. After Hassoun failed to report for daily duty in Iraq on June 20th, the Marines suspected him of desertion. But this tape showed up a week later, appearing to show him held hostage, supposedly by insurgents in Iraq who threatened his life. The military reclassified him as captured. Then, around the time investigators showed up at his parents' home in Utah, Hassoun surfaced in early July in Lebanon. He came back to the U.S. and claimed he was kidnapped.
In the name of God, I'm glad to come home, and thanks for everybody who prayed and support me.
But military investigators tell NBC News they were suspicious of the video from the beginning, believing Hassoun looked too clean-shaven. And then his Marine uniform was found in Fallujah in perfect condition. These are not the most serious charges the military could have brought. If he'd been accused of desertion in wartime, he could have faced the death penalty, Brian.
Williams in our Washington bureau tonight. Pete, thanks. Also in Washington tonight, the Bush administration starting work on one of its biggest priorities, bringing fundamental sweeping change to Social Security through something called partial privatization. As NBC's David Gregory tells us tonight, while they haven't yet settled on a plan for how to do it, the president has ruled out one approach.